Introduction. Languages are not born in a vacuum, but like any other superior form of human creation, they are determined by the ecosystem in which its speakers evolve, the historical events that affect the community, even the type of economy that community develops. We have some extralinguistic influence that has defined some of the peculiarities of the English language. The need to borrow loan words from other languages when the need to name items and objects not known to the English culture. Scientific and tech progress, which makes it possible for a society to evolve from certain production systems to others, also affects the essentials of the language. Computers, for instance, have helped to coin a wide set of new terms. Learning a foreign language, thus, means entering a different universe, the inner rules of which must be learned in order to become proficient users of the second language. This could be a way of interpreting what Connolly and Swan define as sociolinguist competence. Sociolinguistic competence is the ability to adapt every utterance to the context in which it takes place. This variety of competence is but one of the 4 types of speakers needs to become proficient. The other 3 are: 1. Grammar competence, the knowledge of the morphosyntactic rules of the language that will enable the speaker to establish the right paradigmatic relationship. 2. Discourse competence, the ability to use different types of discourse according to the context. 3. Strategic competence, the ability to adjust our utterances to the conditions of the context. The methodology to be used in order to achieve this goal will most likely be the one that paying attention to the learner's needs, using authentic material and making the most of the learner's previous knowledge and skill to improve as a skill. Widen the teaching model. The literature has both reasons in favor and against it. Let's check both. Teaching literature in the EFL classroom, reason against it. One of the most macro skill any language learner must master is reading. Reading involves the learning facing a variety of texts. These texts must be authentic or at least simulated, covey uses of languages at their purest. It must be motivating and related to the student's areas of interest. It must be attractive in its presentation and amusing in contents. What are the reasons against literary text? 1. Language in literature is not real. Language in fiction, drama, and particularly poetry is subjected to a number of distortion in the register, both formal and informal, and a literary language. 2. Literary text does not have a deep practical value. It is clear that learning does not only depend upon practicality but also knowledge itself and communication, but it is important to highlight that students' needs are not always related to literature. 3. Literary text can only be used with advanced students. Students at the earlier stage of learning need to get in touch with the essentials of the language as soon as possible and with the utmost clarity. The degree of complexity found in literary words makes their use with this kind of student inadvisable. Teaching literature in the EFL classroom, reason for it. The aforesaid arguments are among the most common to be heard from EFL teachers reluctant to handle literature text in the classroom. There is an attitude driven mainly by pragmatic reasons which may be somewhat limited. We list here some reasons in favor of literature. 1. Literature and life. It has already been stated that languages do not evolve in a vacuum but definitely determined by their background, understanding by background the set of ecological, cultural conditions that shape the community. Once we have begun to acquire some knowledge of the foreign language, we need to know something about what is possible to do with it. Creating stories is one of them. 2. Literary texts provide motivating material. In many countries, literature is still highly valued. Students taking literary texts are bound to experience a real sense of achievement. Fun, amusement are also factors bound to raise students' motivation. 3. Literary text encourage language acquisition. 4. Literary text constitutes material suitable for caring and sharing activities, enhancing interactions. Literature is one of the few subjects that will always lead students to build up an opinion whether on the contents, the writer's intention, or the actual meaning of the text. Teaching literature in the ELF classroom, collateral issues. Only for advanced students? Graded books. Literary material can be used with students of every level. If complexity is too powerful an obstacle, graded readers will be of much help. English literature or literature in English? It is important to take into account the works written by other non-British authors so as to offer a comprehensive panorama of the English language. Teaching literary text or teaching literature? It will depend on factors such as the student's needs, the flexibility of the syllabus, the learner's motivation to decide whether to work with isolated text or to offer a complete literary syllabus. Methodological issues. Fact to bear in mind. Autonomy. In spite of the higher complexity of literary language, learners, as in every other teaching situation, must be enabled to operate autonomously. Too much authoritarian control on the teacher's part is not advisable. Learner-centeredness. The choice of material should come after considering learners' ability, interests, learning styles. No matter how interesting the work might seem to the teacher, if it does not appeal to the students, it will not work. Goals. Working with literary material does not mean lacking a teaching purpose, for example, planning a lesson. Modeling language. Teaching model structures and make our students repeat them almost purposelessly is a teaching method that finds its roots in behavioristic psychology. The aim is to make our learners find their own way of expressing meaning, not reproduce rehearsed responses. The higher variety of literary language is thus particularly suitable to enhance the kind of diverse response. Affect. The teacher must recognize the learner's emotional response to the literary work. A safe emotional environment is thus most advisable. Silence. Both teachers and applied linguists are beginning to recognize the value of silent periods during lessons, which will enable learners to collect their thought, and work out a rule system or prepare mentally for an oral response. Language-based approaches to literature teaching. Within the secondary education curriculum, perhaps the best approach towards the teaching of literature is the one that stresses linguistic issues rather than purely literally stylistic ones. Language-based approaches are normally less concerned with the literary text as a product and more concerned with the process of reading. It's important to work with the students while reading and become an enabler. The teacher must use a wide range of resources such as close, prediction, rewriting, creative writing to open up the literary text and releasing its meaning. Criteria for the selection of literary material. Availability of the printed text. Familiar text versus unknown text. Lengthy text versus short one. Selection restricted by the syllabus versus free selection. Select for theme versus genre or period. Evaluation. This must be done all along with the book. Working with literary text. Poem. Students should be given a brief biographical account of the writer. A preliminary reading will allow students to find new words. Each student should read a stanza to understand a separate meaning. Short stories. Students can read short stories in class and find the different text of the story.